Once again, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time. We have arrived at Wednesday, September the 16th. I have a most unusually busy day today, mostly online, which is okay because it's not really all that great outside. So the Pacific Hermitage is part of a worldwide family of international monasteries started by the disciples of Lumpur Cha. And this year we were to have a global meeting, which we try to do every 3 or 5 or 6 years, to visit each other's monastery and catch up with one another. And due to the pandemic, that is not possible this year. So we've been working on putting together a couple meetings with a great number of the abbots and senior monks and nuns from our communities. And I was asked to help provide a bit of technical support. So today I'm running a couple practice sessions. And due to the difference in time zones, the first practice session started at 2 a.m. Pacific Coast time. The second one will happen at 1 p.m. our time, because we have to make it convenient for people in all of the Americas, South America, Europe, Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand. I spent some time trying to figure out how I could avoid meeting at 2 a.m. and it's just not all that possible. Somebody's got to give. And unfortunately, we here on the West Coast seem to be the best. So I have 2 live streams, this one and the morning puja chanting, and 3 Zoom conferences today, spanning 12 hours. And hopefully when I'm done with that last one, I can return to my hut and get a little bit of a nap and several hours of solitude. But meeting with people this morning, there's about 20 of the senior monks and nuns who called into the practice session. It was so nice just to see everyone's face on the screen and to be able to chat a bit. We had an hour where we're mostly just making sure everybody can use the technology coming up next week. And I'm sure many of you have had similar circumstances, but it might be one of the better uses of internet technology and screens to be able to meet with far-flung friends and teachers that one can't easily see. So I got to say hello and exchange greetings with Ajahn Jayasaro today, and Ajahn Vijiro, and a bunch of the monks in England, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, and a couple of the senior nuns from Amaravati, which was just delightful. A reminder of this big global community that we have, which is most unusual. Especially outside of traditional Buddhist countries, there are not a lot of monks and nuns, and there are not many large sanghas. And I count it a great blessing that I've somehow fairly easily found my way to Wat Nanachat in the early 90s. I had only lived in one other Buddhist monastery before that, which was also a very excellent monastery run by Ajahn Buddhadasa in southern Thailand. But it was my great good fate, or perhaps my great previous lifetime karma, to land in such a good and honorable place as Wat Pah Nanachat in the early 90s and join this community. And well, like everything in the human realm, it's not perfect. There's a lot of amazing beings and amazing generosity and giving and integrity in the community. And it's just wonderful to be part of a Sangha. Even if it means getting up at 2 a.m., sometimes to nurture that relationship. I was chatting a little bit with Ajahn Krunadamo yesterday, just about community life and some of the challenges that inevitably come up in our communities. And it's this concern of how difficult it seems to be. And my perception is it's increasingly difficult in modern times. I think as individuals and as societies, we seem to be losing our relationship skills and our ability to learn how to live in good and harmonious ways. It's part of the reason why there's so few monasteries of any great size. There are other reasons, but even in Thailand, where there's 35,000 monasteries, the vast majority of those monasteries have just a few monks in them. And there are many that have one. And a monastery of one is not much of a monastery. And technically speaking, it's not a Sangha. Like there are certain aspects of monastic life and Sangha life that require at least 4 fully ordained monastics living together. Anything short of that is something short of what the Buddha designates as a proper Sangha. And while there are many reasons, I think one of the chief reasons why people in the modern world, and maybe especially in the developed world, seem to be losing their relationship skills is an increase in selfishness and a lack or a weakness in being able to practice the kind of giving and relinquishment and yielding that good relationships really demand, I think. It is the chief lubricant of a frictionless and loving relationship to be able to set aside one's own preferences and desires for the good of the group or for the benefit of even another. And one of the most beautiful passages in the Sutta Pitaka is the Buddha visiting a group of 3 monks that are living together with great harmony. And the Buddha asking them, how is it that they live together with such great harmony? And the monk replies with several ways that they live, but the one that stands out the most is this quality of being able to sort of set aside one's own preferences and desires to do what the group wants or what others do. And I think the phrasing in the English translation is, I think to myself, why should I strive to do what I want to do? Why don't I set that aside and do what the others want to do? Which is a beautiful act of selflessness and renunciation that only can really be done through the cultivation of selfless giving and generosity and some insight into how getting what one wants is still dukkha. Association with the disliked is dukkha. Separation from the dear or the liked or the loved is dukkha. Not getting what one wants is dukkha. But getting what one wants is not just sukha, pleasant, happiness, the opposite of dukkha in its meaning of pain. It too is dukkha, in the sense that it is unsatisfactory, which is part of the more full understanding of what this word dukkha means. It comes back to this reflection of not confusing pleasure for happiness. In my American vernacular, there's a measure of pleasure, and it's pleasing to get what one wants. And it's almost impossible for us not to have some orientation towards trying to seek pleasure and comfort and arrange things in a way that feels comfortable and secure and pleasing to us. And I don't think that ever truly kind of falls away. But your relationship to that will change as you start to develop and deepen an insight into the Buddha's teaching on dukkha. Because even getting what one wants is unsatisfactory. And if our relationship to getting our own way is infused with tanha rather than a sense of relinquishment and a kind of easefulness or equanimous holding of it as a mere preference, a mere desire, then that inevitably is going to cause friction. Friction in our own heart, but even more so, friction in our relationship with other human beings, be it our partner, be it our community members, be it our family, be it the community at large. If we're going to lubricate those relationships and eliminate that kind of friction, there needs to be a spirit of generosity and a spirit of metta, or loving kindness. And it must be infused with some dawning maturity and wisdom that holds in mind and reminds oneself and informs oneself sufficiently so that our relationship to preferences and desires is emptied of tanha. And that only happens in some very full way when we see that getting what one wants is still dukkha, still unsatisfactory. It doesn't bring us to completion. It doesn't ultimately satisfy us. And compared to the peace of non-greed and the beauty of generosity, it's a pretty hollow, fleeting sense of pleasure. Like to be able to do what someone else wants and to set aside one's own preferences or desires is a superior form of happiness. And a great support for relationship and community. So remember this, reflect on this. Not getting what one wants is dukkha. And although getting what one wants is sukha, ultimately it's dukkha too, in the sense that it is unsatisfactory. Okay, well, let's look at what's going on in questions and comments today. Ajahn, can you discuss creating the best conditions for practice short of living in a monastery? Thank you. Well, Abby, there are physical conditions that are described as the best of conditions, and having a certain measure of quietude and solitude, easy access to the requisites or the supports of life. So, adequate food, shelter, clothing, medicine. Those are important supports. But those supports in and of themselves can only take us so far. Kalyanamitta, good friends, and in particular teachers, are a very strong support or condition. And while one outside of a monastery might not be able to have a lot of direct contact with a teacher and with monastic Kalyanamittas, people sometimes move to live near monasteries to have a better access. So I would consider that one of the best conditions. If your life is such that you can live near to a monastic community. If we want to talk about the best, and I've had many friends over the years who have done that, who've been able to sort of move and live near a monastery. In fact, Moria, who's here in the chat, when I first arrived at Abhayagiri Monastery in the late 90s, she had moved up from the Bay Area and was renting a house across the street from the monastery. So she was able to participate in events at the monastery on a very regular basis and could walk across the street and join us for meditation, or walk across the street and join us for a Dhamma talk, or walk across the street and meet with one of the senior monks to get some input and feedback. So I think that's one of the best conditions. But having it short of having that opportunity, once one has those other supports in place, arranging your life so that you have the time, and then also you develop some relationships with other people that share the same level of dedication and have the same kind of motivation to really be consciously and consistently putting effort into developing your spiritual practice and your spiritual life, your spiritual understanding. And to be able to meet frequently with those people in harmony, that is a tremendous support. Because remember, although you need to do the practice for yourself, you can't do it for yourself unless you have the barami to be a Buddha. So it does take support from good friends and the wise word of the Kalyanamitta. And I guess part of the blessing of living in this time is some of that contact and some of that association with the good friend and the wise words of good friends can come about through books and recordings and live streams. So those things in particular, I think, are good supports. Maybe one last thing is that one's living situation affords the opportunity to daily practice generosity and acts of selfless giving, whether that's, within your family or community or whatnot. We oftentimes think of the ideal situation as living off in the wilderness with no other people and no distractions. But one of the things that you might be missing there is the ability to give and to help others and to practice generosity, especially in a very direct and physical way, living in such a situation. So to have a network of relationships with people in your surrounding environment or community that act as a field of merit for the practice of giving and generosity, I think that's also another really excellent support. Dear Ajahn, how to differentiate between kind attitude and people-pleasing, as kindness is pleasing to others, but if it turns into people-pleasing, it can be exploited by toxic people. Well, I think the balance that you seek there, Samri, is learning to generate loving kindness for all beings and not neglecting yourself. And this phrase, people-pleasing, at least when I read that, there's forms of people-pleasing which are not motivated by loving kindness. We're trying to maybe ingratiate ourselves with others or to speak directly about it, there's some defilement in the intention that's driving this wish to please other people. I mean, there can be. And so just trying to ingratiate people is one, but there can be others like, you're just trying to please people because you want them to like you or want them to accept you or something like this. Something that's driven by some of those intentions also is not as purified as it could be. And it's not exactly what the Buddha is talking about. He talks about the generation of kindness as metta. So one should be, generating goodwill, loving kindness, friendliness towards all people, and most people can receive that and the pleasing effects of that. But one does not neglect being kind to oneself. And so, if you feel you're being exploited by toxic people, then make some necessary adjustments to remove yourself from that relationship as much as possible or minimize the potential for yourself to be exploited to the best of your ability. That's the kindness that you need to extend to yourself. Ajahn, are senior nuns included in the meetings of the elders? Yes, they are. So, and this morning was just a practice session. We had 3 of the senior nuns from our tradition joining. But there's several more that will be involved in the real meetings, which happen next week. In Sangha, does all members need to be Buddhist? Is a group of friends or people a Sangha, even if they are not a good group? Or if they are not Buddhist? Well, this word Sangha is, as it's coming to be adopted, I would say in the English language, is taking on a bit broader meaning, but the more traditional meaning of Sangha is the ordained Sangha, or even the Arya Sangha, meaning the disciples of the Buddha who have attained one of the stages of enlightenment. So those are more traditional meanings of Sangha. And it's a little confusing because emerging in our language is the use of the word Sangha in a much more loose and colloquial way. Just like a group of people. So if we take the more traditional meaning, then yes, they need to be Buddhist in the sense that they are ordained members of a recognized Buddhist monastic order, or they are Aryapugalas. I misspoke a little bit there too. There is the notion of the fourfold Sangha, which is monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. And that is another traditional. So if we're going to use the traditional term, then they should be identified or committed to Buddhist practice. But some people are not fully committed to identifying as a Buddhist, or but yet they're dedicated to some of the very same virtues and values that we hold dear. And if we want to use this more colloquial usage of the word Sangha, these people can be very good friends indeed. Canadian anthropologist Wade Davis has written and spoke about this breakdown very articulately. The emphasis on individuality and self in modern world he puts at the center of much suffering. Sound familiar? Indeed, yeah, I've read some of Wade Davis's work. He's a wonderful writer, wonderful thinker. And sometimes not getting what one wants is a blessing in disguise. Ha ha ha. I've experienced that many times, and so have I. Yeah, sometimes our wants and preferences are not all that attuned to what's actually best for us. I think it's taken some time, but I've developed an ability to recognize sometimes when I don't get what I want, how lucky it is I didn't get what I want. Okay, well, we're coming up on 8:30. And I have another meeting coming up relatively soon here. All the senior monks of the North American, well, actually all the American monasteries. We meet once a month for a little hour, check in and chat. So I'm going to need to end this and get set up for that. Okay, bye for now.